Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm Ryan Noonan here, as always, joined by Connor Allen to talk NFL sides and totals for week 3. Already 3 weeks in. This stuff flies by. We cannot wait for it to get here, and then it's here. All of a sudden, you're like, what the heck happened? We're already in October. We're getting close. Excited to unpack things today, joined by a friend of the show, the first time on the program. You can find him over at Football Guys, wearing many hats, including today, literally a Football Guys hat. Is our friend Dave Kluge. Dave, excited to have you on. What's going on, buddy?
Not too much. Appreciate it, man. Always fun talking ball. And like you said, the season flies by. Like, it's crazy that we're coming up on week 3 already. Like, it goes by in the blink of an eye every single year. Every year I think I'm ready for it. And before I know it, Christmas is around the corner and we're getting ready for week 17, and it happens quick.
I feel like a lot of people are brethren in the space, like, just bemoan the drags and drudges of what football season brings in terms of, content and all that stuff. Man, I like to hold on to it when it's gone. I feel like, it's nice to get like a little bit of a breather. I don't know. I feel like I wear so many different hats. No actual breather when football season ends. I'm just mad that we don't get to talk about football anymore. So like, I like to hold on.
I wouldn't
to
have it any other way. Like, I'm soaking up every moment of the NFL season. I'm with you. I talked to so many other people that are doing this, and they're just like, it seems like they're not excited that football is here. They're like, oh, there's so much work. And I don't know, man. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, I get to talk actual football. Like, I could only do so much off-season talk, like just rehashing the same talking points nonstop for 7 months. And then we get actual football here. Like, this is the best time of the year, in my opinion.
Let's talk ball finally. Yeah. Jeff chiming in early in the chat, comments on Dave's background with a Ravens jersey and a Bears helmet in the background. That must be a factory of sadness. I don't know. It's been pretty good. I mean, backing Lamar Jackson, our current defending league MVP. I'm not ready to give up on the Bears quite yet. Maybe we'll get to that here in the show, but can't be that sad here. Jeff, you're a factory of sadness when your kickers go under. There's always been kicker props with us all the time, trying to force us down, giving us his medicine, his prop angle. But no, it could be worse, right? All right, gentlemen. I want to talk a little bit off the top before we jump into week 3 specifics here. I want to remind folks, though, there are 2 episodes of Move the Line each week. This is Wednesday's game-by-game preview. Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, Connor, myself, John Hyslop, on Prop Drop, our favorite hour of the week, getting into the weeds. Love your questions. You guys are always very active in that chat. Don't forget to subscribe, whether here on the 4for4 Bets YouTube channel or Move the Line wherever you find podcasts. You want to get all the official plays, all the content that we're doing this season at 4for4 can be had with the betting subscription. Again, if you're still playing season long, DFS, pick'em leagues, whatever you're doing, all that's going to be part of the betting subscription as well. 4for4.com/plans. Lots of different partners too. You can find different ways there. There's actually a tab if you go over to 4for4.com to find like how to get a free subscription. Lots of different cheap ways to get access to that too. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up directly. Connor and myself will be happy to help you out. It's definitely what you want to get though. Betting Sub gets you access to everything. Promo code TROPHY still available out there. $10 first month. So you just want to try us out for a little bit, see if it's your thing. Get the Betting Sub, get in the Discord, get all the official plays. Promo code TROPHY for just $10. Great way to get started. All right. Obviously some very key normal talking points that we have at this time of year around how teams start. We obviously have small saber theater. We just get 2 games, and who you play in those 2 games matter. The overall question at the very, very top here, Connor, 0-2. Is 0-2 a death sentence in terms of being able to advance to the playoffs, or are there any 0-2 teams that you think are still a team we maybe need to be looking in terms of to make the playoff markets or anything like that? Talk to me about 0-2 and what your thoughts are on that kind of general narrative that we have here heading into week 3.
Yeah, I believe since in the last 4 years, we're looking at 6% of teams who started off 0-2 making the playoffs. Including last year, we had Houston as one of them, and then Cincy in 2022. And then if we look at the current 0-2 landscape, in my opinion, I don't think that we need to necessarily blanket like a death sentence. We can see what teams are real or could be real. Broncos 0-2. They're not making the playoffs. Ravens, Bengals, maybe. Titans, probably not. Jags, probably not. Colts, maybe. Giants, probably not. Rams and Panthers. So Rams are just dead. They're got no one left. Brutal. And then the Panthers, again, no shot. They would are on pace to be one of the worst teams in NFL history scoring wise. So I think from that list, you're looking at Ravens, Bengals, maybe Colts, And then the rest, yeah, of course, no shot. So that's kind of like where I'm at with those teams.
Yeah, I mean, especially the NFC teams in particular. I mean, I know some people were buzzy on the Rams, Dave. I don't think Connor and I were in on the Rams necessarily. Giants, Panthers, kind of dead on arrival anyway. Do you want to make the case for any other team that you think here maybe still has an outside shot in terms of making the playoffs at 0-2?
Yeah, it's the Ravens and the Bengals, the two that Connor talked about. I mean, the Bengals, this is the third straight year that they've started 0-2. And last year, they dealt with all the injuries that kind of derailed their entire season. But this is just a team, for whatever reason, always starts slow out the gate. So I'm not concerned about them too much. Connor, I think you hit it on the head. Like, we know what teams are good and we know which teams that aren't, and we can't look at 2 games and draw too much of a conclusion for how their season is going to finish. Like, yeah, the Broncos suck and they're 0-2, and I don't think anybody's surprised by that. They're probably not going to be in the playoff hunt, but the Ravens could quickly get back to 500 over the next 2 weeks, and then we're looking at them. I don't know, maybe you guys can dig a little bit deeper than me, but the only team I can remember ever starting 0-2 and winning a Super Bowl was 2001. The Patriots did it. So, I mean, like, if those are the expectations, winning the Super
America's
Bowl,
team.
it's tough. Yeah, not a lot of teams are going to do it, but we've seen 2 teams in the last 2 years start off 0-2 and make the playoffs, and wouldn't surprise me to see the Ravens do it again this year.
I always think of like baseball at the start of the baseball season. So if you were to go, like, you guy starts the season, right? I don't want to go too long in baseball, but say you go, you start the season as a hitter and you go 0 for 12 or whatever for like the first series, and like everyone makes a huge deal of it, especially if you're good and you're expected to like contribute, and you just got some golden sombrero for 4 straight games or whatever. All of a sudden you go 0 for 12 in the middle of July. No one knows about it, right? It's just like, whatever, it kind of happened, right? So like, and I've seen some numbers floating around too, 0-2, yeah, not great. It's basically like losing back-to-back games at any point in the season kind of makes it very hard for you to make the playoffs. And that's something that, again, we don't have that. We are just going to be prisoners of the moment. It's kind of an easy talking point, but I think you guys make a good point. Currently, the best odds for 0-2 teams to make the playoffs are both the Ravens and the Bengals. They are still minus 145 on DraftKings to make the playoffs. You can get them to miss the playoffs at plus 120. I have some interest in one of those teams to miss the playoffs, but that was a team that I didn't think was going to make the playoffs to begin with, and that's the Ravens. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to that matchup. Is there a preseason take, Dave, that you would like to walk back, player-related, team-related, anything that's happened off of 2 weeks where you're like, you know what? I'd like to get a mulligan on that one.
I didn't even need 2 weeks. It was about halfway through week 1 that I was already regretting my anti-Jaden Reed take. And,
Okay.
Jaden Reed, I know he's a talented player, but you were looking at it like he was purely a slot player. And last year, the Green Bay Packers were only running 3 wide receiver personnel on about 40 to 45% of their snaps. So we were looking at Jaden Reed, in fantasy, he was getting drafted high. His props were really high, and I just didn't really see it. But what I didn't expect was that the Packers were just going to completely switch up their base personnel. And now they operate out of 11 personnel as their base package, which means more opportunities for Jaden Reed. He still isn't able to get on the field for 2 wide receiver sets, but they're almost exclusively running 3 wide receiver sets now, so it doesn't matter. So I'm kind of kicking myself because that's something I try to do as much as possible, is kind of see changes in base personnel packages based on what we saw the year before. And I saw it with the Ravens. I expected them to switch to base 12 personnel, and we saw that. But for some reason, I just didn't read the tea leaves right with the Packers. So I was actually on JJ Zacharyason's show earlier this offseason, kind of spit my anti-Jaden Reed take. And I think he asked me a question that I probably should have thought about a little bit more. He said, who do you think is the most talented wide receiver on the Packers? I said, well, I think the most talented guy is Jaden Reed, but he can only do one thing out of the slot. He's so one-dimensional that I can't buy into it. And I should have just seen the writing on the wall that a wildly talented young player, they were going to do whatever they could to get him the ball, even if it meant changing up their base package a little bit. So that's one that I almost immediately see in Jaden Reed. I believe he had 2 touchdowns and another called back. That was tough to see as somebody who really wasn't in on Jaden Reed this offseason.
Get bailed out a little bit with another Malik Willis start, perhaps, but
Maybe
maybe not. I mean, Jordan Love practicing in maybe a limited fashion or whatever today. So, Connor, how about you? Anything you want to walk back?
Yeah, first off, shout out Jaden Reed, Naperville Central alum. So respect.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have way too many already at 2 weeks in, but we'll go with, I would be so rich right now if Gus Edwards was doing what J.K. Dobbins is doing. I mean, my God, like, this is egregious, apparently, in hindsight. I was very much on, J.K. Dobbins is doing something that no running back has ever done now. And he recovered from multi-ligament injury prior, and now is coming back Achilles, like year 1, just absolutely shredding. We'll see how long it can last. James Robinson did it for like 4 or 5 weeks. on the Jags a couple years ago, and then just like was the worst running back in the league after like week 7 on, and just couldn't even make it through the whole season. So again, count me as skeptical he lasts the whole year, but maybe that's just me clutching at my pearls, kind of like holding on to dear hope that I'm not entirely wrong. But like a team-based take, I thought that the Broncos offense could be okay, and they are not okay. They are very much not good right now. Bo Nix is not good. The passing game is not working. Marvin Mims can't see the field. Jaleel McLaughlin is not being used in the passing game enough. The defense, the run defense still sucks. The Patrick Surtain's basically their only good player on defense. It's just bad. It's not good. And I'm ashamed that I thought that their offense at least could be okay.
It's like I was buying in on the Panthers, man. I thought Dave Canales was going to be the savior of Carolina, and that he'd turn Bryce Young into Alabama Bryce Young. And I don't know. That's I always try to take my misses, try to like learn something from it. And I think what I'm going to do going forward, because I've fallen for this trap multiple years, betting on bad defenses that I think can take that, or bad teams that I think can take that step forward. And that just more often than not ends up being a losing bet. It takes years for teams to kind of rebuild and reshape who they are. And it's very rare that you see a terrible team like the Broncos or the Panthers just immediately turn it around the year after.
Yeah, that's a big ask. I was going to make the Broncos note, Connor, and I'm like, I think Connor might have the Broncos notes. So we can save that one too. How about the Pats? Pats aren't terrible. They're maybe not the worst team in the league. We thought they were going to be the worst team in the league. I couldn't find a win on the schedule. I thought we might get into like week 9, week 10 where we're finding a win, and they got one on the board. They were feisty against what I think is a really good Seahawks team last week too. They continue to have a ton of injuries. They lose Jawan Bentley very early in that game too. They continue to have cluster injuries. I don't know how it's happening. Don't think it's a good football team. I still think they probably go under their win total, but I think they're going to be feisty at least, even though like Hunter Henry's getting like 60% target per route run. That doesn't seem sustainable in terms of like an offensive ceiling for this team, but they're at least, I think, feels like still well coached and prepared and better. And also maybe the Titans. I was kind of poo-pooing the Titans defense. I still think they're a little thin, but if they stay healthy on the outside, I think they can hold up. Pass rush is solid. Again, coaching there might be a thing too, where you have, again, part of the Mike McDonald tree running that defense. And there's, I think, just, again, I want to buy into anything that guy is touching. And that's probably part of the Titans revival too. So we'll see if that's more Bears related, what they did with the Chicago in week 1. Again, they also kind of kept the Jets kind of in control last week too. So I'm interested to see what happens with the Titans. How about, is there like a new take, Connor, that you're ready to cement after 2 weeks? You've seen 2 weeks of stuff and you're like, hey, this is a thing. Caught me off guard. Again, kind of a follow-up to what we had with the last question, but anything you have here real quick?
Yeah, I mean, well, one, the Dolphins are just completely toast without Tua. I mean, it's Jover. I mean, it's just like, this is it. We saw Skylar Thompson. It wasn't pretty. Even Mike McDaniel wasn't able to make it work. I mean, he was barely able to make it work with Tua in the early goings of the season. And I think things are kind of falling downhill here. Probably see a ton of Devin Achane. I mean, they talked about it yet earlier, like, hey, we're just going to keep feeding him. Like, there was a case to be made for him to get more touches, and he was already seeing an insane amount of work on a short week coming off of an injury. I mean, this guy's going to see like 25 touches a game now. So wheels up for Devin Achane, even a bad offense. And then another one, the Vikings defense continues to surprise, plays really well. Brian Flores is making the most out of a unit that I don't think necessarily super talented on paper, but his scheming and blitz rates are through the roof. So, it's just good defense at this point.
Yeah, they just do things that no one else does, and they're hard to game plan for. What do you got, Dave? Anything in this category?
Yeah, player related. I'm going to put Rashee Rice into a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, whether it's for his weekly props or whatever it is. I mean, like this guy has just been balling, and I think there were a lot of questions about his limitations, what he could do last year, running almost exclusively slants. He had the second lowest ADOT in the NFL last year, behind only Kadarius Toney. We've seen that ADOT bump up. He's pulling over a 36% or over a 30% target share, second in the lead in yards after the catch, fourth in the league in yards per route run, seventh in EPA. So it's one of those things where I think a lot of people are just thinking that he's a fluky player who's getting scheme touches. But last week in week 2, we saw him getting some of that usage that we saw at SMU, where he was running go routes and making contested catches. So it's kind of it reminds me of Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy who early in his career had a lot of limitations and they had to scheme up touches to get the ball in his hands. But now we're seeing him in year 2 take that step forward as a more well-rounded player. So I think that's, for me, I'm just looking at Rashee Rice as a locked and loaded top 10 wide receiver going forward every week.
Love it. Yeah. The injuries have broke his way too, obviously with Hollywood out and, kind of learning curve, obviously we'd expect for any rookie with Xavier Worthy there too. Maybe the slowly demise of Travis Kelce finally starting to happen. But yeah, if he can win on the perimeter, like we saw last week, that's definitely opening up a whole new ceiling for Rashee Rice. For me, how about all Nepo babies are not created equal? It seems like Clint Kubiak is maybe the real deal. Now, again, like could be something you don't really get a lot of credit for picking on the Panthers like they did. But they went into Dallas. That team had 17 pressures in week 1 against the Browns, and they have a really poor offensive line. We thought it was going to be a problem, and they found a way to make things really entangled up front, give David Carr a ton of time, pre-snap motion, play action, all the stuff you've read about a ton this week. And it seems to be something that maybe there's some sticking points. And again, obviously there's the old school cocoon. And we thought, hey, like Kingsbury, like Cliff is just here because, Gary Kubiak's been in the league forever, part of the old Shanahan tree. And like Kubiak is with the younger Shanahan last year too. Seems to be some learnings there that might be boding pretty well for New Orleans in the division that we think is probably pretty wide open there, Connor.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the game specifically because there's a lot of good notes, I think, coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll touch on that.
All right, last, a take that you're workshopping, maybe a little too early, maybe a little too hot, but we're gonna put it out there for the people. Connor, anything you got for us here?
Yeah, I added a little bit of Malik Neighbors to lead the NFL in receiving yards. It's like 25-1. He's like 50 yards off only. I mean, Nico Collins obviously is leading right now because he's shredded the first 2 weeks, but I think there's going to be some games where he doesn't have 120 yards, probably, so whereas Malik Neighbors saw 18 targets last week, you still using emotion a bunch. Maybe it was just him shredding, the future salesman corners of Washington. But I mean, I think he's the real deal. Like, I think as him and Daniel Jones continue to click more, like it's just going to be 10 plus targets a game and bad game script where they're just throwing basically the entire half because their defense is not very good either. So it's like one of those things that I want to be ahead of the curve on Malik Neighbors. And I think we were for like props. We bet on him most rookie receiving yards, which Marvin Harrison looks like he's going to make that a little more interesting at this point. But I want more like upside and alt exposure to Malik Neighbors. So I think he's the real deal.
I can't wait to buy insurance from Benjamin St. Just at some point down the line. It might happen soon. Dave, what do you got here? Anything that you're kind of workshopping tape wise?
Yeah, I think we need to kind of revisit how we look at running back age curves because you look at this offseason, like everybody had just written off Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, James Conner, essentially for dead. Like, whether it was in fantasy drafts or in the prop market, like there were very low expectations for all these guys and they all look great. So I think that what we need to do when kind of looking at running backs, whether they're getting up there in age or not, I know the data says that like at age 25, we start to see running backs trend down in production. But I went back to look at all of these guys that I just mentioned to see, like, has there been any signs of regression in the efficiency department? And there hasn't been over the last couple of years. And I think people are just so programmed and conditioned to believe that when a running back turns 25, 26, 27, it's the end of the road for them. But I think these guys that have elite production profiles in the NFL, elite prospect profiles, elite athleticism, they can drag that out a little bit further. Now, I know a lot of people are going to point to Christian McCaffrey. I think his injury is kind of fluky. I don't know if that's a sign of wear and tear or age or anything. And then Derrick Henry is the other guy who hasn't looked great this year. We can look back at the last 3 years that he has started to show that downtick in efficiency. We haven't seen it from these other guys, and we just assume that because they're old, they can't play football anymore. So I think we need to start looking at some of these highly drafted, productive veteran running backs at a different age curve than we look at the rest.
That's a really good point. I mean, we've seen it with quarterbacks, and then obviously the way that they take impact is very different than a running back. But it makes sense with just all the advancements that's positively impacted quarterbacks that put that time in. Obviously, Tom Brady, the greatest example, but like it should have a trickle down effect slowly to increase that aging curve for other positions as well. So good call out there. Last for me, I was in early. Obviously, anytime I had a chance to talk Aiden Hutchinson this offseason, we did, defensive player of the year over on his sack number as one of my biggest future positions this offseason. I still think plus 475 on seizures for defensive player of the year is a really good look, but I'm going to give you a hot take. That's not a hot take. Guy just had 5 sacks last week. We're going to go down the board a little bit. 200-1 defensive player of the year sprinkle. Now look, Connor's already shaking his head, and it's true. Like 200-1. This has kind of been an edge. Defensive player of the year, right? So not MVP. Defensive player of the year. Not Aiden Hutchinson.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well,
I was
like,
wondering.
what am I missing here?
I'm staying in the defensive player of the year setting.
Okay,
I
okay.
apologize. Boye Mafe from Seattle, currently 200-1 on FanDuel to go defensive player of the year. I was way above him in IDP to start the season. Again, it's just this Mike McDonald stuff that I believe in, and it's already paying off. He actually leads all edge rushers in quarterback pressures, one more than Hutchinson. He's second in quick pressure rate, which you can get over now, which is awesome over at Next Gen Stats. And again, if you think this team continues to win football games, threatens San Francisco to win this division, and you get Boye Mafe 15, 16, 18 sacks up where like the big dogs kind of hang sack wise. And this is again, McDonald last year took Kyle Van Noy and Clowney and Justin Matabuke, all these guys that are struggling a little bit this year all of a sudden, and made these guys like 10, 12, 15 sack guys last year. Boye Mafe is legit in his third year here. So that's kind of a little bit of a play. If you think that San Francisco is actually really in an issue with some of these cluster injuries to win that division, again, I think that this is a better, maybe longer shot that's not completely uncorrelated with Seattle winning the division. It's Boye Mafe at 200-1 to win defensive player of the year. I like Devin Witherspoon in that mix as well, but this has been you got to end up having like double digit interceptions. Like this ends up being kind of a little bit of an edge rusher award these days, kind of like quarterback is more of a MVP award. So Mafe at 200-1, a little bit of pizza money, a little sprinkle.
I'm in. I mean, I just bet at live show $15 to win $3,000. Why not us? This is
why not?
right?
It's already it's 100 on DraftKings. It's no offense, show sponsor DraftKings. FanDuel's twice the price. So we have to play it over there, guys. Sorry, it's just those are the rules. We got to give the best of the number to the people. So
yeah, I was at a Cubs game yesterday, and I tried betting Ian Happ dinger. I don't even bet baseball. I only bet $21. I was like, "What? Are you gonna be kidding me?" I'm like, I don't even know anything about baseball. And he did it a dinger though, so they knew. I mean, they knew. Two actually, he had two. It was wild. It was. I should have I was too lazy to get up. I was at the sports book, too lazy to get up and actually put money into the kiosk and like get a slip. And I was just like sitting there, and I was like, "Oh, I'll just put it on my app." No, should have bet more, right? Should have bet more.
Oh man, lesson always. Anytime it wins, should have been more. Man. Why wasn't I more aggressive on that one? I really like that one.
Malik Willis under. I should have done multiple mortgages, not just one.
Oh my god! Yeah. Oh, I know. I told my wife, I'm like, I got this bet too, but I really need Connor to win this bet tomorrow because otherwise he might have to sleep on our couch for a few days. So we were definitely pulling for Malik Willis under. So you didn't have to explain to Maggie why that didn't get home. So
yeah, that would have been rough. Be like this rando who sucks at football actually was good for this game, and he actually did play pretty well. To be fair,
he did play pretty well. He did throw a lot.
He did play well. But thankfully, still comfortably under his under. I mean, he shouldn't even have had 100 yards if Romeo Dobbs didn't moss that one guy. Like literally, he would have 80 passing yards. But I mean, guys were running wide open whenever they did throw the ball. It was it was good. But whatever. He looks like he's not going to start again, unfortunately. So no more unders.
Yeah, see about that one. Again, Wednesday report, injury report, a little early, but we'll see as that shapes out. And let's jump into some of the week 3 stuff. One of the better games on the slate here has Philadelphia coming off of a very disappointing fourth quarter there on Monday Night Football in New Orleans against the Saints. You can shop this around a little bit depending on where you're at. Basically, we're about 2.75 in the market. There are 3s out there. There are 2.5s. So shop it around. Saints are favored. 49.5 is the total. 49 out there on Rivers as well. If you have access to that and you have a lean here, this is definitely an interesting game. The line that we expected in the preseason or what we saw in look aheads. But again, as we touched on there earlier, Kubiak is kind of the bell of the ball right now. Play action splits and all that stuff is really kind of revolutionizing what we kind of had a pretty stale offense with Pete Carmichael. Over the last couple of years, they've been one of the best third down teams. Even better, they're really not getting to third down, which is obviously a great indicator of an elite offense. Kind of revitalized Alvin Kamara here. I think seeing and expanding the role of Rashid Shaheed has been kind of impactful, and I think it's going to continue to open up things on the outside for Chris Olave, who I expect to continue to cook. And that could be a spot here. Eagles defense has really struggled. They are 29th in yards per drive and points per drive through 2 games. Offense has sputtered obviously a little bit. Last week, anytime you don't have A.J. Brown in the lineup there, Dave, it is impactful. What are your thoughts here on Eagles and Saints?
It's kind of crazy to me. Like, I understand everything that you said about Clint Kubiak, what he has done and injected into this offense is impossible to ignore. Last year, the Pete Carmichael offensive coordinator in New Orleans. They ran the lowest rate of motion of any team, and now they I don't know. I didn't check after week 2, but I saw after week 1 they were leading the league in motion, in pre-snap motion. So it's tough to ignore that it is just a night and day difference here for the New Orleans Saints. But man, if we've already swung this hard after 2 weeks that we're starting to give points to Philadelphia, it's really hard for me not to take those points. Philadelphia still looks good. They were a drop pass away from beating Atlanta. They already beat the Packers. I mean, this isn't a bad team by any means. I think the markets are overreacting a little bit to what we've seen through the Saints in the first 2 weeks. I just am hesitant to just immediately say that they're one of the best teams in the NFL, despite looking like that. It's still the Saints. It's still Derek Carr. So for me, it might be a pretty simplistic take, but if I can get points on Philadelphia, I'm definitely taking those.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because if you would have told me that this was the line like preseason, I would have been pretty surprised, I think. And this is like the ultimate one where you have to balance like your priors with like what we've seen through 2 weeks. And I think my priors were like, okay, this Eagles offense should be significantly better. And I mean, I think they are better. Again, like Kellen Moore comes in, they're playing faster, their motion rate's more. Jalen Hurts, when there's been motion, has been really, really strong. Without pressure, he's been really good. The issue is when there's no motion or there's pressure on him, he's not been very good. And so those are some factors that I'm considering here. Their pre-snap motion was incredible. Between that and this Eagles or this Saints defense here, I mean, the Saints team is like not one that I necessarily want to get in the way of. So if I have to pick a side, it's probably the Eagles. Or if I have to pick a side, it's probably the Saints, to be honest. But I feel like that I could just be totally overreacting to 2 weeks. And at the same time, this Eagles secondary, like I thought, oh well, they signed more players. They drafted 2 guys. I'm like, their secondary has to be better this season. And they basically just like picked up like right where they left off last year, like virtually similar metrics, not playing all that well. And so that's kind of what's disappointing. They allowed 4 receptions to wide receivers on throws 20 or more yards downfield, and 6 to receivers that have gained 20 or more yards, which is some of the worst rates in the league. So not great there so far.
Now, do we have any update? I know injury reports haven't officially come out, but it sounds like A.J. Brown is going to be out again in this game. And Marshawn Lattimore was looking like a game-time decision last week, but I get kind of nervous when somebody picks up a hamstring injury. So I think that's the big kind of questions for me in this game. I don't expect to see A.J. Brown out there, and I don't expect to see Marshawn Lattimore either. So if the Saints are without Marshawn Lattimore, we could see another big day from Devonta Smith. I think that's really what it comes down to for me. Probably not going to see A.J. Brown, but if Marshawn Lattimore is out there, that'll change things up quite a bit for New Orleans.
Do you believe that we got a partial practice from Marshawn Lattimore today? So I don't know what that means, but that's definitely something to monitor because I do think it matters quite a bit and what they do and how they can hide and move Devonta Smith around. Obviously, it's harder to hide him in the slot all game, without A.J. Brown out there too, because you have to roll out some real jabronis on the outside. That does not work quite as well. So, we'll see what happens there. But definitely want to monitor. I mean, look, there's a handful of long teasers on the card this week. A lot of teams I think are real interesting kind of around that number. And Philly baked out a little bit on the other side of that is a very interesting long teaser if things start to you start to feel good about injury reports there or bad on the Saints injury report wise. I think that's a pretty interesting leg there too. So I still think that there's a bad offensive line there. And I think that up front, Philadelphia can win and create some problems there that maybe the Cowboys weren't able to do. Now we have we have more film, right? We have another week of film on what they're doing that helps the Philadelphia versus what Dallas had.
I really liked too. There was a great breakdown from Hayden Winks and Josh Norris and like how they like max protect. They've been like having like 8 guys like behind the ball, basically just having like 2 guys run a route. And I guess it's working for them. I mean, when you have that much time, like it's usually helpful, like even against good pass rush. So it's like essentially just mitigating some of that. It's like the opposite of going 5 wide and trying to get open quickly and just praying, which is essentially what the Bears did, all Monday night or all Sunday night. So I don't know. I'm interested. I would say cautiously optimistic, but I don't, like Dave said, like I don't want to overreact to be like, oh, the Saints are just one of the best offenses in the league when like our priors were their offensive line sucks, wide receiver depth is really thin. Derek Carr is Derek Carr. Like there's, a lot of other outs here for the Saints to not be a team that's scoring 40+ points every week.
And we've also got one thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about because he's, not the biggest name out there, but A.T. Perry has yet to play this year, and that's the one thing that's kind of missing from the Saints offense is having that X receiver. Right now we've got Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave who have very overlapping skill sets, and they're great outside the numbers, but they don't really have a guy who's been great across the middle of the field, and that's something that A.T. Perry can do. So a guy who's kind of been a disappointment through this point in his career so far, but seeing how this Saints offense is operating now, if they can add that into their offense, then it's not crazy to think that this Saints offense that's been lighting it up for 2 straight weeks could actually get better.
Yeah, it's a good call up. They've been running a lot of 2 receiver stuff too, which is interesting to see. Again, part of their stuff is a little bit wonky because we had obviously a fourth quarter against Carolina that basically doesn't count, and almost the same exact thing against Dallas, right? So we'll get a better sample on them as we continue to move forward. Another game that I think maybe catches us off guard in terms of preseason expectations. Baltimore is on the road in Dallas. You got a little bit of a short favorite. This is moving a little bit. There's some pick'ems out there. Baltimore's short favorites in some spots. There's a 1.5 is out there too. Most places are at -1. Again, touched on earlier. A little bit personally was below market on both these teams coming in. I had both of them on the outside looking in the playoff picture in our divisional preview series. It's week 3. I think some of the concerns we had are showing up for both teams. Ravens 0-2, lost on the road at Kansas City by a toe. Not the end of the world. Getting blown out, kind of, or blowing a lead there. You can get blown out, but like Gardner Minshew picked them apart. A bit more troubling. Baltimore does this every year. They seem to kind of play with their food and don't really put teams away. So like a big picture, like yeah, this happens, but on the back again, it gets magnified when it's week 2 when you already now are starting 0-2 there. The offensive line hasn't been great. Some defensive issues again when you lose 3 coaches, that becomes pretty impactful. I think we're kind of already seeing that here already. And again, up front, when you can't really protect and you have one guy that can wreak havoc like Max Crosby was able to do in the second half of that game last week, gives me a little bit of pause as we go into Dallas and you have Micah Parsons, you have DeMarcus Lawrence, you have some guys up front that can continue to exploit the offensive line issues here. Dallas obviously not immune too. They got kind of buzzsawed at home last week here too. Connor, what are your thoughts on Ravens and Cowboys?
Yeah, I think there's some misleading numbers through the first weeks. We look at their offense, they're 3rd in success rate, but 15th in EPA. They've scored just 20 and 23 points. And obviously because part of EPA is like, actually scoring. And so that's part of the issue. But on a per play basis, in terms of like staying on schedule, getting first downs, like those numbers, like the success rate number is encouraging. And so I think that holistically is pretty important and kind of in my mind means like don't overreact to them not necessarily playing awesome right off the rip. And then defensively though, like we said they were going to get worse, maybe drop to that like fringe top 10 range. They're 26 in EPA and 19th in success rate through 2 weeks. That is, and I mean one of those games against the Raiders, like that's not exactly where we thought that they would be. And are they that bad? Probably not, but like that's certainly not a good start. And then on the other side, the Cowboys defense here, another like super wide split. 4th in success rate defensively, 20th in EPA per play. So it's like almost the opposite of what they were last year, where they were really high in EPA because they had like 5-6 pick sixes. And then, but like on a per play basis, they weren't very good. So I almost think that they'll probably fall somewhere in the middle and probably be like more of a fringe top 10 defense instead of, the top 5 that we saw in both these units. So I'm curious offensively what happens here. This Cowboys offense too, like, I mean, it's just CeeDee Lamb and a bunch of guys right now, especially without Jake Ferguson. Like, who moves the chains consistently? Who else like helps here? Those are some of the issues that I see with this Cowboys team and like have come to light here. So I'm not sure that either of these teams are really well equipped to, I guess, neutralize the other at this point. So for me, it's kind of just a stay away, to be honest, in general. But I am interested to see it because these are 2 teams, like you mentioned, we were a little lower on than market heading into the season.
Yeah, that guy was supposed to be Brandon Cooks, Connor. That was supposed to be the number 2 guy there, and then he's 8th in the team in targets last week. Just seems like a weird utilization that we've seen from him so far this season. But Ryan, you already said it. I mean, I go back and I rewatch all the games, and the first note that I have from that Baltimore game is all capitals. I say, why does Baltimore always play down to their competition? Like we've seen this almost every single year since Lamar Jackson's been in Baltimore. Like we see these games that are easily winnable, and then they just, rather than putting their foot down on the gas and finishing the game, they just allow teams to kind of come back in the game and hang around when they shouldn't. So I'm almost at the point where I just don't want to bet on any Ravens games at all for that reason, because they can hang with the best of them like we saw 2 weeks ago with Kansas City, and they can struggle against a team like Las Vegas. So I don't really know what to expect from them this week. So Connor, I know you said it's kind of a stay away game. That's sort of where I'm at as well. But I think that what we will see in this game, if we're trying to look at some props, I think this sets up for another Isaiah Likely game. We saw against Kansas City that when Kansas City was able to generate pressure on them, they just wanted to get the ball out of Lamar's hands as quickly as possible. They didn't want him staying in the pocket. They didn't want to wait for the long developing routes downfield. It was just getting the ball to Justice Hill and getting the ball to Isaiah Likely in the flat. So seeing as how the strength right now for the Cowboys team is in their pass rush, I'm expecting to see a similar game plan from the Ravens where they're just going to set Lamar up in shotgun and let him get the ball to Justice Hill and Isaiah Likely as much as possible.
I like that call too. I think we need to see. I don't think we're shocked that Dallas has struggled to run the football. They are generating the lowest rate of yards above expectation this season. Again, leaning on a dusty Zeke Elliott, who like showed a little bit of pop at times for New England last year. Like, again, not like peak Zeke, but he was okay. And I think you've seen like he's yet to create a missed tackle. Has like no runs over 10 yards. Like there's no explosiveness in that offense, and they're still kind of leaning on him too. So it kind of gets harder to do these things, even with the Ravens defense that I don't think is who we thought they were, or definitely not who they were last year. Start to play with one hand tied behind your back and things get pretty hard. So I think that that's going to be an area where they're going to need to improve if they're going to have to prove me wrong and say that they're actually a playoff contender. So that's kind of where I'm at in this one. So kind of a stay away. I think maybe I'm under on the total, though I do think both teams are going to have to throw a lot, and that kind of creates more scenarios where I bring in more over variance, I think, too. But kind of wait and see. And I think it's an impactful one we kind of move forward off of week 3 into week 4. All right, one that's going to be exciting to watch, another over game I think is going to be pretty interesting. Detroit is on the road in Arizona. Arizona's offense absolutely clicking right now. Just kind of going to be an over team all year long, it looks like. Right now, we have Detroit -3 across the board, though it's kind of a little bit of a light 3. You're basically even odds there. 51.5 is the total. So kind of on the wrong side of a key number if you're looking to chase the over. Unless you think this game is absolutely blowing up, then it's on the right side of 54. So it kind of depends on what your thoughts are there. But Arizona leads the league in yards per drive. They trail only New Orleans in points per drive. Kind of saw, I don't know, peak Kyler last week, some absolute dimes against the Rams. We might end up kind of looking back and go, dimes against the Rams are kind of like dimes against the Panthers. It doesn't really matter a lot currently with what's going on there. But again, some Kyler-esque plays, creating time in the pocket, scramble, creating space with his legs. I think we've always kind of been encouraged, at least last year, like Drew Petzig kind of seems like a guy that might be an interesting offensive mind here as we kind of move off of whatever Cliff was in the desert over the last handful of years and what Cliff is now in Washington, D.C. Not great. But people really want to believe in this Cardinals team. I just don't think the defense can hold up, Dave. What are your thoughts here on Lions and Cardinals?
I think this is going to be a shootout. And I think anybody looking at these two teams is going to expect that, to not so great defenses to very good offenses. And this is, kind of similar to the Baltimore, the Philly New Orleans game that we were talking about earlier, where like if you saw this line in the offseason, you probably would have been a little bit surprised to see it as close as it is. But the Lions probably aren't as good as we thought they were going to be going into the season. And I think the Cardinals are much better than we expected them to be. I think this is going to be pretty close. I'm seeing about 2.5, 3 points going to the Cardinals. And this is one where I'm okay going with the money line. I've seen that plus 125, plus 130 on some books. I just think that Kyler Murray is a lot better than people realize. He was kind of playing with a hand tied behind his back with Cliff Kingsbury for the majority of his career. And now with this Jonathan Gannon, Drew Petzig offense, we're seeing him get a little bit more time, some better usage of the wide receivers where they're getting further downfield rather than just the 5-yard curls that we became accustomed to with this air raid attack. And I don't think it's crazy to say that Kyler Murray now has the best supporting cast around him. Like, he had prime DeAndre Hopkins for a chunk of his career, but nobody else really in that offense. Now we've got James Conner, who hasn't slowed down whatsoever and is keeping defenses honest. Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison are both playing phenomenal football so far. So this is one where I'm okay taking the points for Arizona, but I'll actually go with the money line. I expect Arizona to upset Detroit this week.
Oh, nice. That's hot. I like it. And I think part of that too is like this Lions secondary continuously in every offseason, like, oh, they're going to be better. And they're just never better. Like they're just they haven't gotten any better. And we're looking at a team here when they haven't gotten pressure, have allowed a 72.5% completion rate, 7.5 yards per attempt. So it's really like very just pressure, like dependent on Aiden Hutchinson basically at this point. And their run defense is really good though. So like they have a couple of advantages here. They've been allowing, I think it's like less than 3 yards per carry at this point to opposing running backs. So this Lions run defense should slow down James Conner. But like if the Cardinals are game planning to go against that, like they can absolutely destroy this Lions team in the slot. And I think, whether it's Greg Dortch, whether it's Trey McBride running over the middle, like I think either of those players are capable of winning, a lot of middle areas. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. deep. Like, I don't know if there's really a matchup on the Lions where like, oh, like this guy can fully cover Marvin Harrison Jr. significantly. So I'm glad to see him pop off after last week where he looked, or week 1 where he did look slow. He still kind of looked slow, but obviously he was, played a little bit faster than he did in week 1. I mean, it was like, 16 miles an hour in week 1. That's like, that's brutally slow. So excited to see that. And I think you're right. This Arizona offense is fun in this new system with Kyler healthy. I mean, even last year we talked about in the offseason, they were like 10th in EPA per play when Kyler came back. And that was with a bad supporting cast. And like, without Marvin.
And a busted knee, he
Yeah,
was still recovering last year and still playing well. Yeah. And then,
exactly.
I talked about the older running backs earlier in the show and how like we're too quick to write them off. James Conner, man, like it blew my mind looking through like the two efficiency metrics that I care about most for a running back are yards after contact per attempt and broken tackle rate. Like, can you generate yards after contact and can you break tackles? I think those are two important things for running backs. Last year, James Conner set career highs in both of those metrics at 28 years old. Now he's 29 years old and he's putting up better numbers than he did even last year. So we talk about these running backs just getting less efficient as the years go on, but somehow James Conner at his most efficient year at age 28, now at age 29 is somehow even better than he was. So I get what you're saying that it is a good run defense, but James Conner is playing fantastic football right now, and he might still be able to chip away at this defense.
Yeah, he's playing awesome right now. So that's definitely a good point there. I not in this game, but I am curious, like, because you're talking about the running back age curve, where do you lie on Kareem Hunt, who just signed with the Chiefs? 29 years
Oh,
old.
he's dust, absolute
Okay.
dust.
All right.
And yeah, all those metrics that I care about, all the efficiency metrics, he was terrible in last year. And that's it. I think when you start to see a trend over a few years of a player getting less and less efficient, you want to take notice of it. But a lot of these guys that we wrote off this offseason, the guys I mentioned, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, they weren't showing those trends and we wrote them off just because of their age. Kareem Hunt is not only getting up there in age, but he's also shown the downtick in efficiency. So that's a big red flag for me.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. Noonan, anything on this Lions Cardinals game before we hop to any other games that we like? Oh, we got you on mute. First mute of the season. So that's perfect. We were due. Anyways, I have two more other takes. We can circle back to this Lions Cardinals game, once Newton gets his tech going here. But one that I think is interesting, which I guess it depends on Jordan Love here. We saw this total in the Packers Titans game go from 36.5 now up to 38 as we're recording live. That's something to monitor. If Malik Willis is playing, like, this is a big time under game for me. We saw them run the ball a ton last week. We saw them just basically dominate on the ground. And I'm not sure they're going to be able to do the same thing here against the Titans. Like, I think that they're going to have a tough time passing the ball. This Titans defense is like top 10 in basically every metric at this point. And then, I mean, their running defense is a little better as well. So, like, I think this is going to be a tough game. And the Packers defense played the Colts really, really well outside of on the ground. So I think the Titans go run heavy, and it's just going to be like a low scoring, really boring game. Now, if Jordan Love plays, that obviously opens up, I think, a world of possibilities of this Packers offense scoring a little bit more, seeing something that, the Titans haven't really seen yet, because obviously they've only played the Bears and the Jets. So again, we don't really know how good their offenses are. It's like one of those, games where who they played, what their metrics are, like that whole dilemma there. So that's probably one of my favorite other looks there that we were talking with Hunter about, our sides and totals guy as well. Oh,
I think we still got some technical difficulties here, Ryan. Can't hear you. But I'll take this. One of the things that jumped out to me this week that's kind of surprising is seeing the total in the Los Angeles Pittsburgh game, Chargers and Steelers. The total has gone up from 33.5 to 36.5. And I don't know, Connor, maybe you can try to shine some light on this for me. I mean, this is a game where I was thinking about taking the under when it opened up at 33.5. Now it just keeps moving up. Any idea why that line is moving in that direction? Because what we've seen from both of these offenses, the Chargers and the Steelers, is that they don't want to put the foot on the gas, that they want to try to just run the ball as much as possible and slow the clock down. And I'm expecting this to be one of those, ugly games where we're looking at a, 13-10 finish, something like that, 13-19, something weird. Any idea why that line keeps moving up as the week goes on?
Honestly, not really. I think that we're going to see probably, again, a ton of running on both sides. And this Chargers defense through 2 weeks, number 1 in EPA, number 1 in success rate. I mean, again, they've played against the Panthers and the Raiders. So it's like, how much stock do you really put into that? But I do think it's just like interesting, like worth noting, like this team looks entirely different. Their run defense looks good. Their pass defense looks good. So I don't know, just a little bit different for us, I think, looking at this Chargers team.
And I think now that we've seen 2 weeks of how Arthur Smith is going to use Justin Fields, where he's going to put him on as short of a leash as possible and only let him throw outside of the numbers, I think it's going to be easier for teams to start game planning around that defensively. So that's one for me that jumps out as one that, I'm okay taking the under there, especially if he keeps moving in that direction.
Yeah, and then we also got the Panthers Raiders total moving up to 40 with the news of Dalton, which is hilarious. It opened this week, Raiders -7, Panthers, and then the total was like 36, I think maybe 30, 37. Now we're up to 40, 41, 40 and a half. And Raiders are only 4.5 to 5-point favorites. So they're saying basically Dalton is worth like a couple of points here through pretty key numbers. Any expectations about Dalton in his first game back? The last time we saw him threw for like 350, I think, randomly against the Seahawks, I believe. I remember
58 pass attempts, I believe. 58 pass attempts and like 360 yards, which Bryce Young hasn't hit those numbers ever in his NFL career. So yeah, I think we're going to see a much more pass happy attack here. And I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel by saying this, but I think Deontay Johnson is now resuscitated and alive again after just being dead through the first 2 weeks of the season. I think we see Deontay Johnson just get peppered with somewhere between 10 to 12 targets. But man, like how bad is it for Bryce Young that a 36-year-old Andy Dalton, who has started one game in the last 2 years, is, making the line swing that much?
Yeah. My audio is bad, but I think you can hear me. Is that better?
There you are. We got you back.
Sorry, tech guys over here. It's the first tech issue all year. I think that little divisional previews went well as well.
They did.
Definitely due for a couple per year. So, we have to get it off the.
I mean, it sounds like you're in like an underwater prison, but we can hear you. So it's,
I know. The mic is being wonky. That's why I was trying to troubleshoot, and you were hearing yourselves talk and you were hearing nothing. So, I'm with you. I think there's another game similar to what you said, Connor. I'm interested to see what happens with the Chargers and Steelers. This is going to be one of those games where it's going to be in the fourth quarter when some of the other games are like at the end of the second or like it's halftime. These both teams just want to run the football over and over again. We're looking at right now, Steelers and Chargers 30th and 31st in pass rate over expectation. They're also first and second defensively in points per drive allowed. So the total's 35.5. I still think it's probably too high. You might have some maybe efficient parking or passing games here, but still 36 feels like a bridge too far for me with these teams right now. So again, real low total. That's one that I like. I also I want to continue to buy the Seahawks. So Seahawks -4, welcoming, Skylar Thompson and that Miami defense too, which is struggling. Again, the longest flight you can make, staying, in the continental U.S., going from Miami over to Seattle. It's a tough one too. And I just think that the Seahawks pick up on them. So anything less than 6, I think, is a nice number. And then I also want to pick on the Jags. So we continue to hold out hope for Jags to start 0-5, 15-1. Future play on the road in Buffalo, 4.5. Still feels too light to me. So those are two of my favorite on the board this week. Still Buffalo at anything less than 6, I think, is a good look.
Nice. I like that. That Jags future, I forgot about that. We got a little crazy. I feel like, in the off season, I wear like my bet slips. I got too many bets in the queue, too many bullets in the chamber, but all we need is one to land and we're in a really good spot. All it takes is one. Cool.
The Jags is going to come down to week 5 and the Colts. That's the bet. So that was the whole point. Was the thesis was like, hey, if we can get to week 5 and get a coin flip game against the Colts, and you're basically paying me 15-1 to get it, feel pretty good about it.
Would you hedge?
Probably. Probably a little bit.
So
A little bit. I mean, like a reasonable amount, cover the
80%
bet.
of the way there. There's no reason not to hedge a little bit at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
cover the bet. Just cover the ticket. Nothing else. So, yeah. Those are my favorite
cool.
looks here. And a bunch of wonks, Connor. Bunch of wonks. I don't know if you look at the.
Yeah, I'll run through some of those real quick. So we have, for those of you familiar, wonk teasers, moving from below the 3 to above the 7, essentially. So we're looking at Bengals or vice versa. So Bengals -7.5 to -1.5 against Washington. Cowboys +1.5 to +7.5 against Baltimore. Niners -7.5 to 1.5 against the Rams. Eagles +2.5 to +8.5 against New Orleans. Chargers 1.5 to 7.5 against Pittsburgh, and then Bears +1.5 to +7.5 against Indy. I really like the Chargers number. Maybe they lose by 3, maybe a touchdown. I mean, anything more than a touchdown seems like a stretch, just given how we've talked about how they're going to play. And I think both teams' defenses are pretty solid, so it's just going to be a low-scoring, boring game. The variance is super tight with that, and so that's probably one of my favorites. I'm a little bit worried about jumping in front of the Saints here. I mean, again, they just 40-burgered the Cowboys, whose defense I think is probably better than the Eagles at this point. And so a little bit concerned about that, Wong, to be honest. But probably I would say Chargers and Bears are honestly my favorite, just because I think that the Bears keep it close enough against Indy. This Bears defense, we should talk about the Bears before we leave, because, Dave's a Bears guy too. Well, I'll let Dave, I'll let you go first. Where are you at on the Bears right now? Because I have thoughts as well. So,
I think they got one of the best defenses in the league, and we saw that last year as soon as Montez Sweat showed up in the picture. I think a lot of people, you guys obviously watch the games and you understand context and all those sorts of things, but a lot of people look at the Bears season as a whole and think that they're just kind of a middle of the pack defense. But if you look at the steps that they made after adding Montez Sweat last year, they went from a bad defense to one of the best in the league, and that's spilling over into this year. Now they've got a healthy Kyler Gordon and a healthy Jaquan Brisker. So I want to continue betting on the Bears, because the defense, regardless of who they're playing, is going to keep them in a lot of close games. As far as Caleb Williams, I don't know how much time we have here. I could talk about Caleb Williams for a whole hour, and I'm going to try not to. Obviously, it's concerning. I think a lot of people expected him to just come out guns blazing week 1 like we saw last year from CJ Stroud. But we got to remember last year, CJ Stroud got off to an 0-2 start. He didn't look great his first couple of weeks. He showed some promise here. But I think the silver lining, there's 2 things that I kind of find in the silver lining with Caleb Williams. One, he went from looking terrible in week 1 to kind of bad in week 2. And that's an upward progression. And that's what we want to see from a rookie quarterback. They don't need to be great right away. They need to get better. And we saw him get better. And the second thing is that in college, his biggest fault was holding on to the ball too long, bouncing out of the pocket too early, trying to make plays with his legs. And it seemed like one of the biggest talking points in Bears camp was that they wanted to keep him in the pocket, stepping up into pressure. And he's doing that almost to the detriment of him and the team. He might be staying in the pocket a little bit too long when he should be bouncing out, but it's good to know that he is willing to get coached up on what were some of his weaknesses in college. So I know, the national media is already calling him a bust, and everybody's already freaking out because of what they saw in a primetime Island game, but I'm trying to remain calm here. It's 2 games into his NFL career. He's shown progression, and he's shown that he's able to fix some of the problems that plagued him in college.
Yeah, no, I like that take. I think the next 5 games are massive, because he draws the Colts, the Rams, the Panthers, the Jaguars, the Commies, and the Cardinals defense. I mean,
they're going to cook, dude.
He'd easily be 5-2 going into
week
8. Cook. I could not be less concerned about Caleb Williams. Maybe that's naive. I'm just not. I think we can look back. I already touched on the Titans. I think the Titans might be good, and the Texans are a legit Super Bowl contender.
Yeah,
right.
The defense kept him in that game. He hasn't looked good. They're averaging 3 yards per play. It's just really bad. All the metrics are terrible. There's nothing that you're going to find. But I don't know. I'm not concerned. I don't know. Where are you at, Connor?
Well, my only concern is that, so a couple of things. The scheme has been really disappointing, and we saw DeMeco Ryans blitz crazier rate and play man at a crazy rate. I mean, I don't know if this guy's just Shane Waldron's never played Madden before. Get your guys in motion, get bunch bets, pick guys. What are we doing here? There was none of that. None of that. We have no short routes when we know that they're sending 6 or sending exactly 5. And you only got 5 guys blocking. No max protecting like the Saints are doing. If you're not going to do that, there's so many options, and he's choosing to do screens to Gerald Everett with DeAndre Carter blocking, or, getting DeAndre Carter. To me, I'm what are we doing? This is more egregious than even the timeout shit. I'm what is going on here? So I was watching that, very frustrated. But that being said, I think you guys are right. the Titans defense is probably pretty good. Texans defense we know is good. So like, I mean, again, this is like, it has to be at least competent against these next 5 teams. Otherwise, like, I'm not still like Shane Waldron just needs to be fired. I'm not worried about Caleb. He just needs to be.
I take Luke Getsy back at this point. Like at least Luke Getsy, when he played against Minnesota last year and knew they were blitzing like crazy. You remember that game? It was something like 32 of 37 pass attempts were screens. Like they just wanted to get the ball outside to avoid the blitz. And we knew that was coming last week. And for whatever reason, Shane Waldron just refused to adapt.
So strange. It was so strange. I don't.
No Keenan Allen is a problem, but what you just listed off, Connor, those are like 5 of the worst defenses in the league.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
You got to make your hay a little bit, Yeah. Again, I'm not concerned. Is it a playoff team? Yeah, they're a fringe playoff team anyway. Coin flip, but like the season's not over because they lost, to the Texans in a bad way, right? I mean, Texans are going to kick the crap out of a lot of teams.
What a lot of other people fail to realize too is like, I don't care about this year that much for the Bears at all. Like they've got DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet all under contract through the entirety of Caleb Williams' rookie contract. Like they have a 5-year plan here. And the fact that people are freaking out 2 weeks into what should be a 5-year plan is just, that just kind of sums up how fans react to football.
Yeah. And Bears fans, unfortunately, as you could probably relate to, are conditioned to feel like the sky is falling. Just couldn't even believe that Caleb Williams could possibly be great because they've actually never experienced it in their life, which is brutal for a very passionate fan base and city that absolutely loves the Bears. So hopefully they can get it eventually. So yeah, I'm in on. I don't know. The Bears are a great play this week. I think they are an interesting long. My 2 favorites would probably be. I like the Chargers 1-2, Connor, just to differentiate. I think the Bengals 1.5 at home or 1.5 against the Commanders here. And then the same thing, the Niners 1.5 against the Rams. What's going on with the Rams? Even though the Niners are struggling as well, I feel like they're still significantly better. So I think those are probably my chalky long favorites to get you under 3. So, all right, Dave, appreciate it as always. People can find you on Twitter.
No, don't. Really don't.
Yeah, that's all right. It's great. Where else can they find all your stuff?
That's it. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge, where it's a lot of sarcastic and joke posts that go over people's heads. But really, just follow me at Football Guys, youtube.com/@FootballGuysFantasy. That's where I got shows, articles, all that good stuff coming out exclusively at footballguys.com.
Appreciate it. As always, subscribe before you take off. 4 for 4 bets on YouTube. Move the Line podcast will be back on Friday for Prop Drop. For Connor and Dave, I'm Ryan. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.